Is Mario Kart World worth it? Look, in my opinion, when you're asking such a question like, is it worth it, it's almost impossible to give an unbiased opinion when it comes to a very successful franchise like Mario Kart. For those who are looking into it or already got the game, I'm sure you're having fun as it's a great first title for the new console. But if you're not willing to fork over the cash for a whole new system to even have a chance of playing the game, then you'll probably be highly against it. So, am I defending the egregious price point Nintendo has been plastering across all Switch 2 games and appliances? No, $100 for a video game is fucking stupid. But am I defending that the game isn't worth buying because it's simply unenjoyable and maybe there's not as much value in comparison to other games? Also no. I still think this game is made with a lot of love and attention, which I can always appreciate, and it's still a quality product at the end of the day. So, simply put, in terms of Mario Kart World, if you're willing to buy the game, I'm sure you'll love it. If you're not willing to buy the game, I'm sure you'll hate it. Both sides are correct. So, what's the point of this video? Pros and cons. Yep. For those still sitting on the fence deciding whether or not to get this game but haven't decided to purchase it for one reason or another, this video is for you. I'll be honest, I'm not really good at arguing and I'm not gonna try and convince anyone that this game is either good or bad. I'll just be personally listing everything I like or dislike about the game so far after playing it for about a month straight. Obviously, this is very subjective and I've played multiple other entries in the past, so I would be lying when I say I won't even just be a little bit biased at times, but again, whether or not you agree with me is entirely up to you. This is basically going to be the most bare bones review of Mario Kart World you'll ever get. So spoilers, even though it's Mario Kart, there's not much to spoil, whatever. And just to prove a point, I'm putting just the cow alone in pros to start off.
Dang, that looked good.
I'm just gonna get these few things out the way. The entire playfulness design motive is a pro. After 11 long years of the same old modern Mario designs similar to the new Soups, Mario Kart needed a fresh coat of paint, and this was arguably the best way to do it. Everything from its character designs to its animations and even soundtrack, there is not a single miss across the board when it comes to its art style and overall presentation. Yes, I don't even mind the Seth Rogen DK. They didn't need to change all of his old artwork though. As far as character designs go, MK World takes the Mario Wonderoo and bases character models off of past key artworks and renders made by a variety of artists. Artists like and notable for his work on the original Super Mario World.
Important cultural property.
I really like how the main man himself looks more like his several N64 box cover artworks. I don't know, I thought that was cool. The animation work in this game is just phenomenal. Everything from tricking to the little dance everyone does on the menu, even how the NPC obstacles move and hop around. Everything just feels a little bouncier and more lighthearted, and it's all just good fun. And I know some people will complain about how it feels to actually play because they're not used to how expressive everything is, which I just say, it's Mario Kart. Can we just remember it's Mario Kart? Oh, and the soundtrack? Incredible. Although there are still course-specific themes, like any other entry, for the numerous new intermission segments in this game, Nintendo decided to completely recreate countless of the Mario series' most iconic music that would instead play shuffled no matter what area you're in. The over 200 song remix track list itself spans across both the Mario Kart series and literally anything tied to everyone's favorite mob boss. If nostalgia was a drug, then the Mario Kart World soundtrack alone is the fastest way to OD. Not a single one of these remixes are close to their original counterparts and are all absolute bangers. One you might have heard already is one of the two remixes of 1-2 Underground theme from the original Super Mario Bros. And how they made the bold decision to hire Andrew from Whiplash to play the jazz fusion drum solo.
Nothing gets past my bow.
So Mario Kart World single player has a total of 6 different game modes to choose from. Just like pretty much every other entry in the series, you have your Grand Prix, Time Trial, Versus, and Battle, with the 2 new modes being Knockout Tour and Free Roam. There's nothing to really say about Versus and Time Trial, they're pretty much the same as every other game, so I'll skip those for now and just go on to Grand Prix, which, Look, I didn't think the new Grand Prix system would be that big of a deal, but after playing it at least 32 times over, I can safely say that they shouldn't have tried to fix what ain't broke. I get that the big selling point exclamation mark of this game is that everything's interconnected and you can drive everywhere on anything, yada yada whatever, and I'm all for game designers experimenting with new game ideas, but overall, I think all that happened here was that this experiment simply failed. So for those who don't know, since everything is now connected between different paths and roads, or intermissions, the traditional Grand Prix system has been reworked to fit this new game. Instead of doing 3 laps of one track before moving on to do 3 laps on the next, you'll instead be doing 3 laps on the first track like normal, but then the next 3 rounds consist of driving to the next location and only doing 1 lap when you get there. On paper, it's not that bad of an idea as long as the roads are interesting enough to drive on. However, in practice, the roads aren't interesting enough to drive on. No matter how many enemies, cars, NPCs, CPUs, or just general explosions fill the screen, it doesn't change the fact that most of the time, you're just driving straight forward. Now, I don't think the issue here is necessarily intermissions on their own. As you might notice over the course of this video, I bring them up a lot, but I actually don't mind them as a whole. Hot take, online they're actually just as fun as normal tracks, but I'm specifically talking about the selection of intermissions on the Grand Prix here, so as much as I appreciate them trying something new, I'm gonna put the Grand Prix in cons, but it's not all bad. It's still fun as always, and I don't hate it as much as everyone else does, but I think the better option should be just to revert back to the traditional 3-lap formula in the next game. Now, in saying that, I'm also going to put the entirety of just the Shell Cup alone into cons for now, but I'll explain why much later. On the opposite end of things, I have nothing bad to report on Knockout Tour, both as a single player and an online experience. Everything that made the new GP system feel a little tiresome and dragged out is completely removed when it's one long continuous race and everyone's fighting for their life. Knockout Tour is an absolute battlefield and also an absolute keeper of a mode. I know I'm speaking a little bit early, but I assume MK10 will revert back to its roots, but if it does, they need to find a way to keep this mode to some capacity in the game. Because not only is it so popular now, but people have been wanting this mode since all the way back on MK Wii. The modding community over there had already created their own version of Knockout Tour ages ago with the CTGP. If you know Troy here, then you know what I'm talking about. Now, I think free roam as a whole would have been a detriment to not having this game, even though it's far from perfect. You're able to explore the whole interconnected world minus Rainbow Road either by yourself or with friends, which is just a cool thing in and of itself to do. Combined with the new mobility options this game provides, it's really fun to just shut off your brain and drive around aimlessly for a short while, seeing what you discover. There are a lot of cool features here and there, hidden UFOs and buses actually dropping these guys off, which at least blew my mind, but the main reason why you should spend so much time in free roam is the collectibles, which unfortunately sort of don't matter, like at all. Besides the possibility of unlocking a variety of stickers, which I think are neither good or bad, they're okay I guess, the game gives you no incentive to find its 3 main collectibles scattered across the world. Those being the question mark panels, P-switches, and Peach medallions. You could make an argument for the panels as that's the only collectible this game actually keeps somewhat of a track of, but other than that, you only really complete P-switches for the fun of the challenges rather than the reward. Which again, not a terrible thing and encourages players to just play for fun, but for anyone like myself who tends to 100% these games, it's not something I would necessarily be clamoring for. And the Peach medallions don't mean shit. But all this could easily be fixed by adding the bare minimum of a checklist. Something to keep a record of each collectible you obtain through free roam, but as it stands, there's no way of knowing how many are left to collect, which is just a shame in my opinion. So overall, having free roam is a plus, but I honestly expected more from the collectibles themselves. Okay, I'm gonna keep this short and sweet because I haven't touched the mode at all. The entire battle mode goes straight into the garbage. It only has 2 game modes, 3 less than MK8DX, and MK Wii already did it better. The battle maps themselves follow suit of Mario Kart 8 from the Wii U, which if you don't know, just repurpose existing tracks into battle maps instead of making brand new ones. There are only 2 maps in the game that are designed for battle mode, exclusively featured throughout the game's intermission segments, but the rest is just laziness. I get it would have been a nightmare to try and fit more battle maps into the open world, but for a $1 trillion company and $100 out of our pockets, we should be getting the best of all worlds and not just the majority.
What animal is that? Huh? Huh? It's a fucking...
Oh, the roster. Mario Kart World is definitely a bold new inclusion in the mainline Mario Kart franchise that explores brand new ideas that have never been done before. I personally think this roster solves the same number of problems as it creates. Not all of these issues are as important as one another, but I'm going to bitch and complain about it anyway and act like they all are. Starting with the fact that unlockable characters are back, which I think is ultimately good. I'll admit, I only got Mario Kart 8 Deluxe about a year and a half ago, but I've definitely put plenty of time into it since. But the reason why I didn't bother buying it for the longest time was because I already had the base Mario Kart 8 on Wii U, and it was far from being one of my favorites. But one thing I remember doing in comparison to 8DX was having to unlock a majority of the characters, which I actually really enjoyed the process of, just playing through the Grand Prix casually and seeing who and what I unlocked at the end of them. And I feel the same way about unlockable characters as any other game with a thriving roster. I much prefer having to unlock a full roster of characters than having every option available from the get-go because it feels more rewarding for putting more time into the game, making some characters you may never even play feel more significant and worth trying out. So I'm glad you have to go and unlock characters again. But I don't like the way Mario Kart World goes about it. In summary, this is the greatest nitpick of all time. The way you unlock characters, costumes, and creatures all have some weird downside to them that just makes it feel less interesting or special. For instance, costumes. To unlock a costume for a character to use permanently, you have to play anyone that isn't a creature, then collect and use a regional specific dash food. Dash food itself gives you like a half mushroom boost, but also changes your costume depending on where in the world you grabbed it. If you've never used that costume before, congratulations, now you can. However, eventually unlocking all costumes in the game can go one of two ways, and I feel most players will all do the same thing that I did as soon as I went into free roam. Either you can not focus on getting all the costumes in the game and just play it naturally until you do, meaning you'll have to play as each character multiple times, race in certain locations, and pick up the required dash food, or, and this is where I think most players will lie, you can easily go into free roam, find the location of the specific dash food that you need, collect, use, change character, rinse and repeat until you have everything. Meaning, collecting costumes in this game will either take you an hour or a decade, neither of which I think are a balanced experience, and one obviously being a better option than the other. Is this some sort of oversight? I couldn't tell you. I don't think it is. I think the developers knew about it, but didn't see it as enough of a problem to fix for a stupid kids game, so I don't know. I just think it's not as rewarding. Like I said, in summary, greatest nitpick. Unlocking creatures on the other hand is a bit more RNG based, and I still to this day haven't unlocked 2 of them. I can't be bothered complaining about it. You get the idea. Now, as much as I just bitched and moaned about creatures and costumes, I think they're both ultimately still great inclusions in this game, especially costumes. Probably should have been in the last installment, but creatures are a nice little bonus. Both their inclusions, I believe, are a necessary step forward without inflating the roster with the most niche characters or versions of existing characters, and then still having one person complain about how fucking, I don't know, Forful isn't in the game. I have more to say about the concept of costumes than I do creatures, so just to get it out the way, turning the NPC obstacles or enemies into optional races is a great choice. Obviously, it wouldn't have taken as much time or effort to convert them into playable characters as just creating a whole new one, and to counteract how many options you have, none of them have any selectable skins which you need to collect, and that makes perfect sense. If they added a skin for each of the creatures in this game, we would be celebrating GTA 6's launch instead. So I consider the creature characters as a bonus rather than replacements to past characters that didn't make it in this game. Well, all except one character. Look, I can think of at least one reason for every character that didn't make it into Mario Kart World. I understand not wanting to bring back the Koopa Kids because you wouldn't be able to define them as either a skin for Bowser Jr. or under the creature category in this game. I understand not bringing back the crossover characters because you want to just focus on the mainline Mario series and celebrate its long-running history. I even understand characters like Metal Mario or Dry Bowser or even Funky Kong not being in this game because they're too similar to existing characters but too unique to be a skin. I can think of a reason for everyone in this game, except for Diddy Kong. Where is he? This is the 4th game in a row where Diddy Kong has been snubbed by nothing but air. Diddy Kong hasn't been in a base game roster since 2008. And now he's disappeared without reason once again. I know I've only played him like maybe twice in my lifetime. Once on Wii, once on Switch, but I have considered Diddy Kong to be a staple of the Mario Kart franchise ever since his inclusion in Double Dash. My philosophy goes, if Bowser Jr. and Birdo can be in a Mario Kart game, then why not Diddy Kong? If all 5, not 4, 5 of these little shits can be in a Mario Kart game, then why not Diddy Kong? If fucking Lakitu can still crawl his way into a Mario Kart game, even though not a single soul on this earth plays as him, then why not Diddy Kong? I don't get it. I sincerely do not get it. I understand Donkey Kong went through the biggest redesign. He still barely made it into the game. There's already a Diddy Kong redesign. No, I don't get it. There is not a single reason that Diddy Kong should not be in this game. And I'm gonna start doing something about it. I swear to God. Hashtag free. Like I was saying much earlier, costumes were definitely the way to go from ADX. What I didn't expect was for the number of costumes to not be equally distributed across the board. For instance, Luigi gets like 8, but Birdo only gets like 2. And at first, I thought this was a little disappointing. But now, after unlocking everything in the game, I don't see it as a complete negative at all. Well, unlocking everything except for the fucking stupid bird. Having an unequal number of costumes still comes with the same baggage as you would expect, but I was pleasantly surprised with how it actually solved a long-running issue I've had at the back of my mind for quite a while now. Do you know who this is? Well, I mean, I couldn't tell you. I've never really picked him. I usually like to play as either Toad, because he's awesome, Rosalina, because... or the cow, but this guy? Fuck, man, I don't know, Pikachu? This is what I call the Mario is unpopular theory, and I am far from the first person to ever talk about this, but the age-old saying goes, when given the opportunity, thou shalt never pick Mario in a Mario game. This spans beyond Mario Kart, and as far back as SMB 2, and more recently Super Mario 3D World. In either of those games, you have the choice between this red guy, Luigi, Peach, and Toad, all of which come with their own benefits. Luigi jumps the highest, Peach can glide across the level, and Toad runs the fastest. But this guy? He's just red. Now I will mention, MK World doesn't have game-changing abilities, then pretty much everyone works the same as according to their weight class, but the problem remains the same. Nintendo never really gives you a reason to ever pick him when there's so many other interesting or better options available, and that makes sense. He's had so many games where you're forced to control the least popular Italian plumber on Earth, so why would you ever pick him willingly? Mario not only has the most costumes in the game by far, but he arguably has some of the best. My top 3 are probably Cowboy, Sunshine, and Mechanic, but I wouldn't be mad playing as either of these. Except default, thou shalt never pick the red guy. Costumes doesn't just give the player the incentive to sometimes, God forbid, pick Mario willingly, but to those who want to unlock everything, you'll have to play as him at least once. Dickhead. So love him, hate him, or forget he's even there, there is now a reason to pick Mario, making him a popular choice by proxy. Now on the opposite side of the spectrum, what happened here exactly? As it stands, DK and Pauline have the least number of costumes in this game. Shy Guy, all of the babies, and even fucking Lakitu have 2 alternative options each, where the monkey and the mayor only get 1. Which is insane. I know for a fact more people are picking both of these guys over the other 7 I just mentioned, and especially over one of them. So why do they have only 1 alternative each? My big tinfoil hat conspiracy / prayer is that Nintendo are waiting for the release of Donkey Kong Bonanza, and with that, they might update Mario Kart World with I hope and pray to all that is holy free DLC to feature more skins based on that game, and maybe, just maybe, complete the roster with a single character? Huh? Please? But as of the making of this video, yeah, they kind of just shafted these 2 to the side for no reason. What's even more weird is that DK is the first unlockable character in the game. Like, why don't we start with him? And also on that note, why do we start with both Baby Daisy and Rosalina before actually unlocking Daisy and Rosalina? What? And on one final note about this roster, I just want to talk about the UI itself, and why it is the single worst designed menu I think I've ever laid my eyes on. And I'm not talking about the poses or all the little dances each character gets. That's awesome, I love that, and I already put it all in pros, but the UI itself? What the fuck am I looking at? I remember watching a bunch of demo footage a month before the game actually came out, and the only thing I really had to complain about at the time without actually playing it was its character menu. And my big dumb idiot brain thought that this was all just a placeholder because of how each costume were a separate slot and characters were jumbled up without any sense of categorization. I was wrong. I get the whole playfulness motif, and I gave the benefit of the doubt when it came to the collectibles in this game. I don't even care that they just copied 8DX for the most part for the rest of the game, but come on. Come on. How did the last game do it better with a simple drop-down menu for only select characters? And yes, there is a sort button, thankfully, and it does categorize it by character vertically, but if the menu was designed like literally every other Mario Kart, there wouldn't be a need for a sort button. And even then, it still doesn't fix everything. So yes, I am a picky bitch, but come on. You can't blame me for this one. The unlockable one, yeah, sure. Diddy Kong, don't go there. But this, you can't blame me for this. Okay, I'm done ranting about it. Overall, this is one of the probably the safest rosters in all of Mario Kart. Mario Kart 7 existed for a reason.
They need to let me make the new Transformer movie. I do the best Transformer. I want you to give it up for Robo Bitch.
I am so happy to say that I only have good things to say about the vehicles in this game. First and foremost, the UI works so much better with the vehicles than it does the characters. Dear God. But other than that, there are a few differences between this game and the past few installments that I think makes this one of, if not the best selection of vehicles across any entry, which is fascinating to me. So, to address the Zach Scott games in the room, Mario Kart World goes back to the traditional formula of vehicle selection and remove the abilities to customize vehicles entirely, which I'm shocked to say was the right choice. Look, ever since I picked up Mario Kart 7 for the 3DS way back when, I thought vehicles had peaked in terms of creativity. Now being able to customize the body, wheels, and glider to your liking, I just thought, wow, how would they ever do anything else? Then they continued the vehicle customization into Mario Kart 8, and I just thought, wow, I wish they could do anything else. Look, I don't care about stats in Mario Kart. Ever. The main issue I had with vehicle customization was how no combination ever really looked good, and in some cases, even when parts were meant to match, they just didn't. So I always thought at the back of my mind how it would feel like if Nintendo were to revert back to just selecting a vehicle like DS or Wii, and I'm happy to say, God, is this so much better. Not only do vehicles just look and feel more complete, but the color palettes for each option match so much better to the driver you selected. Although not all vehicles provide character-specific colors like we did, they're just designed so much better without needing to take into consideration different wheels or gliders. If anyone were to argue that this is the greatest variety of vehicles across any Mario Kart game, I would be inclined to agree. I genuinely can't think of one that tops this. Wii comes close, but World just has more options. Plus they brought back the Dolphin Dasher? Fuck it, hell yeah! I know it's only been about a month into the game's launch, but I also have to praise the fact that there is still no single broken vehicle combo discovered in this game. Furthermore, there is still no de facto best character nor vehicle separately, and so far, this is one of the best balanced MKs ever made in terms of vehicles. No Yoshi Teddy Buggy, no Waluigi Wiggler, no Dry Bones Bomber, no Funky Flame Runner. This gives players the freedom to experiment and play as any combination they want, knowing that whatever they choose, they won't have to feel like they're at a disadvantage for not picking someone with a higher speed stat, or 0.1 mini turbo, or some dumb shit. It's Mario Kart, a fun baby game for all ages. That's how it's meant to be. And I know I just said I don't care about stats, but it's because I never want to see a whole lobby of the same character or vehicle ever again. And that takes me to my last pro about the vehicles in general, and it's that both karts and bikes feel equal. Another shocking thing I didn't expect to end up liking was that inside drift bikes altogether have been scrapped completely. I grew up playing Mario Kart Wii, where inside drift bikes dominated, but I even knew that the issue with having two different drift styles was no matter if inside drift or outside drift was better, there was only ever going to be one best option, rendering the other obsolete. And seeing how they butchered inside drift in 8DX, I ultimately think removing inside drift entirely and just focusing on a more widely appreciated outside drift was the way to go. Finally, the Rob Hog is the single greatest vehicle ever designed. Let's say it as it is. It is so apparent that Rob shouldn't have been an MKDS to begin with, and him returning wouldn't have made any sense. So instead of just ignoring it and acting like it never happened, Nintendo finally homaged him by turning him into a bike. I know all the Rob heads out there are either gonna love or hate this, no in between, but as someone as scummy as I am who mained Rob for a short time in Smash, I appreciate both the reference and just how cool the bike itself looks. I couldn't have imagined it in any other way, and it's definitely my new favorite vehicle of all time. Plus, similar to Smash, depending on the character you pick, he either sports the colors of the Famicom or the NES. Just perfect.
Fuck is this? I got the wrong. I don't want that shit.
There is simply too much to talk about when it comes to the tracks in this game. How each track has a day, night, and rain cycle, how they decided to hide SNES remakes into intermissions, how depending on the Grand Prix or where you traveled from, the track sometimes starts and ends in different locations, how they designed the track-specific theme songs to include both an intro and outro when driving in and out of it, how they completely reimagined all the tracks by taking its general layout and just going balls to the wall with it, so technically nothing and everything is a retro track at the same time, breaking multiple unwritten rules. There is simply too much to talk about, so I'm just gonna be as lazy as the battle mode this time around, and I'm about to rapid fire each of the technically 32 tracks in this game onto a separate tier list from S to F minus E based on their 3-lap variations. With that, I'll also give a fairly short explanation to justify each of my choices as quickly as possible, and at the end of it all, I'm just going to put what I think is the biggest takeaway from all of this into both pros and cons. And that starts in 3, 2, now. Mario Bros. Circuit is definitely the starting track of this game. It certainly does its job. C tier. Crown City Mushroom Cup variation. This might be a little mean, but I literally only remember one part where you jump through the big donut tire thingy. D tier. Whistletop Summit. Honestly, a little underrated, but it's not one of the greats. B tier. DK Spaceport. Basing a track of the original Donkey Kong from 1981 was either going to be really good or really boring, and I can happily say this is one of the better tracks in the game. A tier. Desert Hills. Had no reason to return over Dry Ruins, yet it did, and it's okay. I like these guys a lot. B tier. Shy Guy Bazaar. Yeah, you know what? It is a little weird. You don't actually drive into the massive palace in the center, but other than that, this is still a modern classic. A tier. Wario Stadium. The last track to return from MK64, and they did it justice, fixing pretty much every issue that stopped it from returning originally. Still B tier though, it's not incredible. Airship Fortress. My personal favorite track in the entire game, and it hasn't lost anything that made it so great on the DS. S tier. DK Pass. I thought we were just gonna move on from this one since DK Summit was basically its successor, but nah. Plus this random pit at the start is so evil. It's great. B tier. Starview Peak. Look, I want to like this track more because it's so visually stunning, but it mainly comprises of a few very slow and long turns. C tier. Also, is this an Ice Ice Outpost reference? Sky High Sunday. The original is my most hated track in all of Mario Kart history. In my eyes, it was hard to look at, didn't make any sense, and when you really dumb it down, it's probably my least favorite shape to ever exist. I cannot explain to you how much I hate this course with every fiber of my being. So I can't even begin to comprehend how not only they chose to bring this one back out of all the original tracks from ATX, but they did, and they made it so much better. It did not deserve to be an ATX, but I welcome it with open arms in world. Still only A tier though. Fuck you, Sky High Sunday. Wario Shipyard. On paper would be a very weird pick for a returning track in this game because of all the new water physics, but god damn, this is by far the best water-based track maybe ever made. A tier. Koopa Troopa Beach. Music bangs hard, but it's ultimately just 5 laps of an SNES remake that goes around in a circle. It's not a bad circle, I guess. C tier. Faraway Oasis. I confused this one with Dandelion Depths just because of how much I don't remember them in this game, but after replaying it, it's not too bad. C tier. Crown City Shell Cup variation. They removed the only segment I remembered from the first one. F tier. Peach Stadium Shell Cup variation. Heh, what a cool castle design. Too bad we're not racing in it, that would be fun. F tier. See why I hate Shell Cup so much yet? Peach Beach. I gotta say, I'm honestly very impressed with this one, since I only recognized it maybe on my 3rd playthrough of it. It changed a lot, and for the better. A tier. Salty Salty Speedway. Don't be fooled, this track has a lot more shortcuts than you think it does. B tier. Dino Dino Jungle. The track that probably features the best intermission segments because of all the dinos. A tier. Look, I know I'm just judging them based off the 3-lap variation, but it's Dino Dino Jungle. Of course it's A tier. Come on. Great Question Block Ruins. Holy shit! I'm not lying when I say this, I get a fucking heart attack every time I play this track. By God, is this S tier. Cheap Cheap Falls. Definitely the best cheap oriented track I can think of off the top of my head. B tier. Dandelion Depths. The other track that I can barely remember. But it has a similar issue to Starview Peak where it's visually stunning but gameplay wise boring. D tier. Boo Cinema. Good idea. Good track layout. Overall, pretty good. B tier, Dry Bones Burnout. This definitely makes up for how boring Bone Dry Desert was in the last game, and all the twists and turns and alternate pathways keeps this one entertaining. B tier, Moo Moo Meadows. I now see that Nintendo needed to sacrifice an amazing track to make one of their worst ones better. But did it have to be Moo Moo Meadows? I might be overreacting. All they did was add a random straight segment, making the initial turn far less interesting, but overall, this is by far the worst iteration of the modern classic, and just felt like the closest thing to a legal obligation to add because of the fucking cow. F tier, I am beyond disappointed. Choco Mountain, gotta be honest, I've never had any attachment to the original, but this reimagining is not only furthest from its original iteration, but it's genuinely pretty good. B tier, Toad's Factory. At first glance, I thought this track was worse in every single way, especially how it's far less difficult from the original. But now after playing it a couple more times over, it's only worse in some ways. B tier, Bowser's Castle. Trying to beat the time trial ghost for this one made me appreciate just how unique and awesome this version is. A tier, Acorn Heights. Another super fun track, and it's honestly on the cusp of S tier, but I really just want to dedicate that tier to my favorite recreation and original track, so A tier for now. Also, is this a reference to Wild Woods? Mario Circuit. Is it crazy to say that this is the best SNES Mario Circuit remake of all time? It's still only C tier, but is it really that crazy to say? Peach Stadium Special Cover Variation. So much better than the first version. You actually drive inside the castle, and when you're not, you're on the outside floating around it on an interesting path layout that includes pipes like Mario Circuit. No, seriously, is it really that crazy? B tier. And finally, the infamous Rainbow Road. I want to put this on top of S tier. I really do. This is by far one of the greatest Rainbow Roads ever made, and definitely the greatest Rainbow Road visually. Unfortunately, the replay value just isn't there. It's by far the longest track in the game and combines past iterations of the beloved course into one big grand finale, send-off, love letter, whatever you want to call it for the series in its own unlockable special cup. But it's just not a track I'm picking anytime soon to willingly play just because of how long it is. So with that being said, I'm sorry, I can't personally justify putting this any higher than A tier, but I won't argue with anyone who would. And that's time. So, like I said I was going to do, I think the biggest takeaway from each of these tracks is that Sky High Sundae is actually playable now, and Moo Moo Meadows has been sold to the slaughter. I'll be putting the link to the tier list maker I used in the description. Now, just before I move on to the last topic I want to talk about, I just have a couple things that I want to point out relating to downsides, because I don't think I'll ever get the chance to otherwise, and that has to do with the CCs. For one of the most chaotic Mario Karts ever crafted, not implementing 200cc into the base game is such a disservice. I remember not being the biggest fan of 200cc in the last game because some tracks weren't really designed for it, and was kind of just an added extra bonus option. The reason why I thought it didn't really work as well is because a large portion of the game's tracks felt too small to race on at such a high speed, needing to brake drift or just hard brake entirely, which I don't want to do in Mario Kart. I just want to go, be fast, come first. Needing to brake just feels so wrong. So out comes Mario Kart World, where each of the tracks feel huge to accompany 24 races, and what a perfect mode 200cc would be to fit in with the game's catalog. What do you mean we didn't get it? Mirror mode? What the fuck? And that leads me to my next con. Hot take, maybe not. Mirror mode always and will suck. I always thought it was such a sluggish way to add another option to the game. Oh, it's the track, but someone hit free transform flip horizontally. Yippee! Now I can race the same track on 150cc, but my display's been flipped and my controls have been inverted. Hooray! Not to mention, I already complained about unlockable requirements, and mirror mode is the most egregious thing to unlock in the entire game. I think what pisses me off the most about it is that a much better option was there. It was available. And that's finally including reverse mode. A feature scrapped from Double Dash's development and in fucking Tour out of all places, making it so you simply race the track backwards, providing an all-new layout to a course you've probably done hundreds of times already, but it still feels brand new. Additionally, not a game designer here to tell you that this wouldn't have been as hard to implement as other Mario Karts. There's already an entire open world and free roam where you can pretty much access everything anyway, so all they had to do was add a few ramps. That's all they had to do. Look, this is just making me more mad thinking about it. I'm gonna stop for now and finally move on. Move on to something that pisses me off the most! The Shell Cup can fuck off. This is the single most miserable Grand Prix I've ever had to endure. Ever. And I played it more than 4 times. I may not have played every single Mario Kart ever made. I'm still yet to try Super Circuit and Double Dash. But from what I've gathered, I don't think anything comes as close to just how brain-numbing MKW's Shell Cup is. You know it's a bad sign when the first track, which is an SNES remake that goes in a circle for 5, not 3, 5 laps, is the best part of the cup. Combined with the new GP system, which I already said failed, you then have to drive straight to whatever this track's called. I've already forgotten its fucking name, probably not important anyway, before having to drive straight to the inferior versions of both Crown City and, to top it off, Peach Stadium, which is just a fucking over! This cup makes me hate both the fact that Crown City and Peach Stadium have 2 different versions to begin with, but they decided to add those second versions as priority over having 32 unique tracks in this game. The bare minimum. Making MK World have the least number of unique tracks out of any Mario Kart since the DS. Obviously not including all the intermissions, but you get my point. Shell Cup, garbage, bad, get rid of it. Con, I'm moving on, fuck you. Hey, you know who also has a shell?
¿Cómo lo llevas? ¿Bien?
Kinda weird to think that I've left the gameplay till last, but I've pretty much been covering everything as I go along, so I've left some of the more general pros and cons for the end. And just to get it out of the way, since I did mention it earlier, just the fact that there's 24 races now instead of 12 is great. This game thrives on chaos, and what's more chaotic than doubling the number of players at a time? I don't really have anything else to say on that matter. So I guess I'll move on by just covering the new trick system, which I really enjoy. There are so many more mobility options in this game that don't rely on just getting a certain item at a certain point like most shortcuts tend to do. Now being able to charge up jumps to hop on rails or drive on walls and even do multiple directional tricks in the air at the same time gives players more shortcut potentials at any point in the race. Plus, I think one of the best feelings in a game is discovering something that feels like you shouldn't be able to do, yet you can, and I think the trick system does that perfectly. I think some of the best examples of what I mean come from watching the world records for Great Block Ruin specifically, because it feels illegal to skip a massive portion of the track just for clipping off of one pillar. Yet you can, and it feels like discovering a loophole to the game's mechanics. But for balancing purposes, the trick system isn't designed to make you go any faster than you already do. That's what drifting is meant for. It's designed to give you the ability to drive any way you want, letting you as a player decide what will be the best way to cover the most distance, or help you catch up the fastest depending on circumstances. And even for beginners who may not like to use the new system, you still don't have to. If Nintendo's good at one thing, it's level design, and how each of the tracks, no matter how ridiculous they look, don't require a PhD in aerospace engineering to drive along. So, all in all, the new trick system is well balanced and very well designed. I wish I could say the same thing for drifting in this game. I've already mentioned probably a couple times by now, and I'm sure you might have heard the same complaint before, but a lot of this game is made of intermissions. Intermissions are mainly comprised of straight roads, and the fastest way to travel on said roads is to just drive the straightest line possible. Fucking Shell Cup. Not requiring any need to trick or drift or take any shortcuts, which in terms of gameplay is super boring. So what I've found at least is sometimes you'll be in a race on an intermission, hovering second place, and you'll never be able to catch up to the person in front of you since you're just too far behind to draft, and drifting would be a slower option entirely. Having you to rely on RNG alone to give you a shell in hopes of whoever's in first not being able to block it. Or you just miss entirely like I do most of the time. So the problem isn't exactly drifting being too slow, it's more that driving straight is the fastest option. If the game were to be patched so that drifting sort of worked more akin to its previous installments, it might fix the issue, but maybe create some other balancing ones. I really couldn't tell you. At the end of the day, I'm not a game designer, I'm just complaining about someone else's paycheck. BTW, I'm not going to talk about the ability to reverse time at all since I think it's one of the most controversial features in the game. I can't for the life of me decide whether to put it in pros or cons, so I'm just going to avoid it altogether. Plus, being able to throw items in any direction might be an exploit and not a feature, so I also won't talk about it for now, but if it's intentional, then 100% it goes with the good stuff. But back to pros one final time, I guess I should add that both the new items and physics in this game are excellent. There are 4 brand new items and 2 returning ones, and each of them are a good inclusion. I don't really have anything else to say on that front, but I more want to talk about the brilliant decision to add more physics-based obstacles in this game. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's a pretty niche detail, but all the items and everything thrown out by NPC obstacles and enemies all work accordingly to the environment around it. I think the absolute best example are Spike's balls. I mean spike balls actually rolling in the direction of the hill instead of one continuous linear pattern forward, making it much harder to predict where it's actually going. Some of the things Kamek spawns will do the same, and even your car when you get hit by a blue shell will bounce around accordingly to how the surface is faced, rather than just sending you upwards and back down again. Also on that note, I like how you tumble like MK64. There are a lot more references to 64 than I thought. Lastly, about the physics, going underwater has been completely removed in favor of just hovering above it like a jet ski, which I appreciate a lot. I'm pretty sure most people will agree, but I always hated the underwater levels in Mario games, and that spans across 2D, 3D, MK, or any other spin-off. Maybe not Galaxy or Odyssey, but pretty much everything else. And it's mainly because there isn't much to do once you're underwater. Your controls feel a little different, a little slower even, and that's about it. Otherwise, it's the same shit, different smell, but slower. But now that you bounce along the water's surface instead, it feels more like a naturally integrated thing and doesn't stop the flow of gameplay. Oh, and with that, anything that causes a splash or a wave around you, you can trick off or even trick through with your character realistically interacting with each element presented. Water levels are now good, and I already said it earlier, but Wario's Shipyard is the best example of this. A returning track known for being one of, if not the best underwater course, but now being reworked to be the single greatest water course ever made. Maybe. I don't remember how good Cooper Cape is. So with my final complaint to balance out my pros and cons, I just want to ask a simple question. What do coins do again? No, like, seriously, besides unlocking vehicles, what do they do? Coins have been slightly tweaked in this game, as they were arguably quite broken in the last, but how they're meant to work is that the more coins you collect, the faster your overall top speed will be. However, you might think that makes coins the most important thing in Mario Kart World, since a lot of the racing derives of everyone say it with me now. But instead of having to collect 10, you can now collect up to 20, scaling how much your speed actually changes quite a bit. And yes, that doesn't make coins feel as broken as the last game, but now they feel entirely insignificant, the complete opposite extreme. Not to mention, you can still pull a coin as an item in this game, which if you're either in first or second, you are begging and pleading to be red shelled. I know 2 of the new items in this game help you collect coins much faster, but they both come with secondary effects that are actually useful. Wait, never mind, just one of them does. I thought the coin box gives you like a mushroom boost. Nah, it just doesn't do shit. To put it in perspective, most world records in this game don't even have top players collecting coins. So really, coins just feel like another collectible, and you already know my thoughts on those. But with that being said, that's the end of my list. Is Mario Kart World worth it at the end of the day? Well, sorry to be a cornball, but that's up to you. I can recommend it and say it's definitely a top 3 MK of all time, but like I said at the very beginning, I'm sure I wouldn't have said that if I didn't pick it up on a discount, and I'll probably still be boycotting it to this day. Obviously, the game's far from perfect, and there's definitely areas to improve upon. And I know I didn't cover everything relating to the online functionality, and that's because I've spent more time 3-starring all the single player options so far, and I only started playing online for the first time just to provide background footage for this video. But in the end, I can safely say it's still a high quality production with a lot of TLC put into it that celebrates the history of Mario Kart as arguably the greatest spin-off series ever created. Well, maybe like 95% of the game, with the other 5% lost in battle mode. And the Shell Cup. And Lakitu. But otherwise, pretty good. Like 9 out of 10. This is my first video I've ever made, so if you want to support me, donate to my Growtopia world. Anyway, thanks guys.